Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important topics for a detailed and comprehensive coverage. And as promised, at the end, we shall include some of the important press releases on Press Information Bureau as well. But that is at the end of the session. Now, before we start, I have two very important announcements. Those of you who are preparing for 2027 and beyond, you have a great opportunity to enroll into our new Elevate batch. We are following a classroom like model with the Elevate batch to ensure that two GS subjects can be covered in the same day. Two classes, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And this provides sufficient time for your revision, for practice, along with covering two GS subjects at the same time. So this batch begins from 1st of June, and this would be the right time to enroll because Unacademy is providing the lowest price ever at 16,999. You can avail the subscription along with up to 12 months of free extension. So those interested, please check out the details by clicking on the link below. And on the subscription page, you might see a different fee. To avail the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. And please note that this offer will end tomorrow. And to help the mains aspirants who are preparing for the upcoming mains exam, Unacademy is launching Conquer Mains 2026, a comprehensive program covering all the subjects from GS1 to GS4 that includes classes on the static portion as well as the current affairs part, which is crucial for the upcoming exam. This includes mains answer writing practice by the top educators. Plus, we'll also be bringing the top rankers of the previous year's exam, those who are ranked under 50. They'll be conducting several classes of live answer writing sessions for you. Along with this, you'll get access to our mains test series program, the MRTS, and detailed notes for every subject, especially subjects like internal security, disaster management, ethics, where you don't find ready material in the market. So, as you can see, our team of educators would be handling these subjects under Conquer Mains, and this is available at 9,999. So, those interested can enroll because the course begins from 31st May, that is from tomorrow. So, with this, let's get started and look at the first topic. On page number 6, there's an important editorial that deals with the deadly heat waves that have engulfed the country. This article mainly focuses on the impact of heat waves, what is causing the deadly heat wave condition, and what can we do in order to implement a heat action plan. See, according to latest reports and weather forecast by IMD, certain places in Rajasthan, particularly Sri Ganganagar, has hit record temperatures of 48 degrees Celsius. Now, this is essentially a severe heat wave, particularly in northern northwestern parts of India. Few pockets of central and even the eastern coastal plains of India have been registering deadly and decimating heat waves, which has a huge impact on people, on ecosystems, and as well as on our economy. Now, if you look at data from World Meteorological Organization and temperature records with regard to the Indian subcontinent, what we are witnessing right now is indeed a fundamental shift. So, definitely, climate change, global warming, is one of the key driving factors which is contributing to more frequent, more intense heat wave conditions during every summer season. But according to this editorial, it's not just the long term effect of climate change and global warming. There are other factors as well, especially the way in which our urban areas are planned, which are also contributing to the deadly heat which is being experienced across Indian cities. Now, when you look at the frequency of heat wave spells, it has increased by zero point 0.1 days per decade since 1961. This is considered as a significant increase in the frequency of heat wave occurrence. And this is based on historical temperature data. According to WMO, the last decade, that is 2015 to 2025, It marks the hottest decade, and especially for countries like India, the impact and the burden is much higher, as 30% of our land area is extremely prone and vulnerable. If you look at central parts of India, northwestern parts of India, and the eastern coastal plains, then even interior parts of the Deccan Plateau, covering interior parts of Karnataka, Telangana, the Rayalaseema belt, and towards Maharashtra, the Vidarbha belt as well. So these regions account for more than 30% of India's land area, and these conditions can have a detrimental impact on agriculture, on the rural economy. It can have a decimating impact on human health, and particularly in urban settings. So, just blaming climate change, global warming, will not help us find the right solutions, according to this editorial. There are ways in which we can manage this heat, through which we can mitigate the impact of this disaster. Because this 11-year stretch has been the warmest decade on record, according to the WMO. And this trend is likely to continue. So, when you look at IMD's forecast and the heat map of India, the northern, northwestern, central, and eastern parts of India, they are the most prone and most vulnerable. There are few pockets in northeast India as well, few pockets in the interior part of Deccan Plateau, but it's primarily these regions of India which face the highest burden of heat waves. Now, how exactly is a heat wave classified? Since heat wave is a notified disaster by the National Disaster Management Authority, and IMD is the nodal early warning forecasting agency to provide timely alerts, the IMD has established a specific criteria to determine the start of a heat wave. So, depending on the altitude of the place, different thresholds have been set. For plains, 40 degrees Celsius is the minimum. For coastal areas, 37 degrees Celsius. For hilly areas, 30 degrees Celsius. This is the reference point. Any temperature deviation from here is what IMD considers to determine the start of a heat wave. So, based on this threshold, if there is a temperature deviation by 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, if the AMT, the actual maximum temperature, breaches the normal maximum temperature, NMT, with a deviation of 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. So, this indicates the start of a heat wave. And the other criteria for severe heat wave is if temperatures of 45 degrees Celsius and above is consistently registered, this triggers the declaration of severe heat wave, irrespective of these threshold criteria. Now, these temperatures will have to be recorded in at least two stations for 2 consecutive days. So, for 2 consecutive days in 2 weather stations, if these temperatures are recorded, if these criteria are met, IMD declares the region to be affected by a heat wave. Now, heat waves bring abnormally high temperatures, and they have a very big impact on human physiology. It can also severely affect agriculture, plant productivity, and it can completely devastate ecosystems, having an impact on biodiversity as well. Now, what exactly is the impact that we are looking at? Now, when you look at the death toll in India, India does lose a number of lives because of heat waves during the summer season. The government records indicate something else, but experts and latest research, it exponentially increases the mortality rate in terms of heat waves. According to the Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, back in 2023, when India witnessed a deadly heat wave, the government recorded around 360 cases of heat stroke related deaths. When you compare this with the latest research, which was published just a few days ago by Frontiers in Environmental Health, according to this study, even one day of extreme heat can result in up to 3,400 excess deaths across the country. A heat wave that can stretch over 5 days is reported to cause around 30,000 deaths. Now, one thing is very clear, that government estimates might be a big underreporting of the actual number of cases. Because, see, when people are exposed to such deadly heat, especially during the peak period from, let's say, 10 in the morning all the way till 4, 5 p.m. in the evening, when the heat exposure is maximum, especially for manual workers, daily wage earners, street vendors, etc., construction workers, they face the biggest brunt. Human physiology takes a severe hit. Those who are exposed during these hours will not only face very quick dehydration, it could result in heat cramps, which could translate into nausea, vomiting, muscle cramping. And if it is left unaddressed, if the individual doesn't get the right medical treatment, if the individual doesn't get a chance to cool down the body and rehydrate himself with electrolytes, water, etc., then you are staring at the possibility of a heat stroke, which could result in the collapse of the internal organs, causing a cardiac arrest, and it could become fatal. So, India registers hundreds of heat wave linked deaths. The reports by independent agencies will be much, much higher than government records, mainly because the healthcare system does not capture heat wave linked deaths accurately. But one thing is clear, that heat waves, they do have a big human impact, and this translates into a social and economic impact. It can severely compromise agricultural productivity. It can affect plant growth, affecting ecosystems. It can result in water scarcity, which can have an impact on biodiversity as well. So, when you look at the human losses, the damage to the economy, the social and environmental impact, heat waves become a deadly disaster, a recurring disaster. They can even contribute to increasing incidents of forest fires, wildfires, and urban fires as well, triggering secondary and tertiary disasters. So, given that climate change has become a reality, extreme weather events are becoming a reality, the fact that our cities are not well designed, the fact that our cities are not well prepared to deal with these conditions makes it even more aggravating problem, especially the urban heat island effect, because of the poor design and the expansion of our urban areas, is directly contributing to enhanced heat being experienced in our cities. According to studies, urban heat island effect is adding anywhere between 2 degrees to 10 degrees Celsius in the center of the city compared to the outskirts and the suburbs and the rural areas that are present around the city. Now look at this cross section here, which perfectly illustrates the urban heat island effect. Because of the population density, the crowding of buildings, and poor ventilation within the city, and the concretization that you see, along with covering of the surface with asphalt, and the destruction of tree cover and other natural buffers like lakes, wetlands, it takes away the moderating influence. When the green cover is destroyed, when the lakes, rivers, wetlands, when these natural buffers are destroyed due to rampant urbanization, it takes away the moderating influence of these natural buffers. They play a big role in moderating temperature. Now, when you take cities like, let's say, Chennai, Bengaluru, or Mumbai, or Delhi, which were known to have several green spaces or wetlands, lakes, etc. And when you look at the kind of encroachment which has happened, mainly because of real estate mafia, the construction industry, and the destruction of the natural buffers, it has taken away that moderating force, thereby resulting in significant rise in temperature in the center of the city. Plus, the adoption of very poor building design, which is not suited for Indian context. The blind replication of Western architectural designs in our buildings using glass and other material, which is a very poor ventilator as such, and abandoning of traditional construction methods has directly contributed to the crowding of buildings, trapping of heat within the cities. Upon that, you have vehicular exhaust, and you also have the widespread usage of air conditioners as a cooling solution, which in turn is contributing to excess heat being thrown out, especially in the center part of the city. In places like Delhi, studies have shown that there is a 8% increase in humidity level. A place which is known for being dry, right, has seen an increase in humidity, which is an indicator that AC usage has gone up, and meaning people who can afford ACs, right? Usually the middle class, the upper middle class, the rich, and those who work in air conditioned offices or complexes, malls, etc. They are the ones who are able to take the benefit of this cooling solution. But this has a detrimental impact on the poor people, right? Because heat waves, they have a disproportionate social impact. It mainly affects the weaker sections. It affects manual workers, construction workers. It affects street vendors, daily wage earners, construction workers. So, with rising heat within the city, driven by concretization, asphalting, destruction of natural covers and buffers, enhanced usage of air conditioning, poor building design, all these factors put together, it's basically putting the entire burden of the disaster on the weaker sections in the city. And that is a concern being flagged by this editorial. While the privileged can largely get away with the impact of heat wave because you have access to shelter, you can afford to work from home or work from office, which has an air conditioner. You can afford to access fluids, water, electrolytes. Thus, you never face the true impact of a heat wave. But it's the poor working class that are forced to work in the outdoors because it's a necessity for them, it's a livelihood matter for them. They are the ones who will face the entire brunt of the deadly heat waves. They are the ones who will have the highest exposure and they are at the risk of suffering heat strokes. This is why the editorial is urging the center, the states, the local bodies to ensure that better building standards are enforced. Building design standards, they should not just be sustainable, but it should prioritize better ventilation. Also, the construction material which is used, instead of blindly copying Western architectural design filled with fiber, plastic, and glass, it's better to rely on traditional construction material, which is known to have a natural cooling effect inside the building, which in turn can reduce the AC requirement. So, completely revamping our building design, construction materials is necessary. Then, protecting the natural buffers in the city is also equally important. Mandatory expansion of green covers, protecting the existing and the remaining lakes and water bodies and wetlands. These basic measures will go a long way to help us mitigate the impact of heat waves. It can help reduce the AC usage as well in cities, and it could help us adapt to the reality of climate change and global warming. So, this is what we take away from this editorial. So, please take up this mains practice question based on what we have discussed. See if you can write a good mains answer for this question. Now, let's take up the next article. We have another important editorial on page 6 that relates to the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting. So, recently, the foreign ministers of the Quad group, that includes United States, Australia, Japan, and India, they met in New Delhi at the foreign ministers meet hosted by India's foreign minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. And there were some important outcomes. So this gives us an opportunity to understand what is the Quad, what is the relevance of the group, what challenges is it facing, and what were the key outcomes of the foreign ministers meeting. This foreign ministers meeting comes at a very critical time, at a time when the world is in chaos, at a time when the world is engulfed with conflicts. So, following the foreign ministers' meet, several new initiatives of the Quad grouping were announced. So, please make a note of this, can be very important for prelims and as well as for mains. The Quad group has decided to enhance their maritime surveillance collaboration. Since the group mainly prioritizes the Indo Pacific region, it focuses on enforcing the rules based order of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It focuses on upholding international rules. It plays a big role in the Indo Pacific region to monitor any emerging maritime security threats. So, the Indo Pacific Initiative on Maritime Surveillance will enhance the security posture. It will help bring their navies and their surveillance networks together, their tracking assets across the Indo Pacific region together. For example, India already has a very well established coastal surveillance radar network stretching across India's coastline, island territories like Andaman, Nicobar, and Lakshadweep, and also in friendly foreign countries like Mauritius, Seychelles, etc. This radar chain gives a complete picture of shipping traffic almost all across the Indian Ocean. So India would be willing to share these assets with US, Australia, Japan and integrate maritime surveillance to enhance the tracking of the movement of vessels across the Indo-Pacific. Then to complement this, they are establishing the enhanced Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. Now these two complement each other. Maritime surveillance, maritime domain awareness, they go hand in hand. It essentially helps to track the movement of vessels and any emerging threats in the sea. They've also launched the Quad at Sea Ship Observer Mission, which is an initiative between their coast guards to deal with any emerging threats. It could be piracy, it could be criminal cartels operating in the region that threaten the safety and security of the shipping channels. The Quad at Sea Ship Observer Mission would be a Coast Guard led initiative of the four countries, again focusing on maritime safety and maritime security. They've also established the Quad Critical Mineral Cooperation Initiative to secure the supply chains of critical minerals. They've launched a Quad Energy Security Partnership to ensure energy supplies are not disrupted by global geopolitical shocks. But what is really important and interesting is that the Quad group is now prioritizing the South Pacific as well, especially the Pacific Island countries. A little away from Australia and New Zealand, you have a group of small Pacific Island nations like Fiji, Tuvalu, Palau, and others. And China is playing a very big role in the South Pacific, stretching and expanding its military presence. Traditionally, in the South Pacific, it was only US, Australia, to some extent Japan, which were influential. Now, India is also stepping up its presence and influence in the South Pacific, especially with countries like Fiji, because it has a very large Indian diaspora. Since the British era, Indian laborers under the indentured labor system were transported and dumped on the island of Fiji. And today, their descendants, they form a direct cultural link with India and form a very strong and vibrant Indian diaspora community. So, in the country of Fiji, the Quad countries are launching their first ever Pacific Island infrastructure project. The Quad countries will be investing in the building of a strategic port in Fiji, which enhances their economic and strategic presence. And the Quad nations will also help Pacific Island countries to establish undersea digital cable networks. The submarine cables that carry the internet. South Pacific nations are very remote, largely isolated. So, all the countries of Pacific Island Forum, they will be integrated into this resilient undersea cable network, which will be laid by the Quad nations. So, this was one very interesting outcome. The focus on the South Pacific, which is a clear indication to China that Quad nations are looking to actively counter China's presence across the Indo Pacific region. But however, not everything is going well with the Quad group. To understand what are the problems and the challenges, you need to understand the history of Quad. The quadrilateral, it has a history that dates back to 2004. Its very origin, its birth, goes back to 2004, the deadly Indian Ocean tsunami that brought widespread destruction to multiple Indian Ocean countries. Because of the underwater earthquake near Sumatra, a massive tsunami unleashed complete havoc from Indonesia to Thailand to India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and even as far away as East Africa. So, multiple countries came to the assistance at that point, and that was the first time that India collaborated with US, Japan, and Australia. Their navies extended humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to other countries that were affected by the tsunami. For example, though India itself was badly affected, especially Tamil Nadu, Andaman Nicobar, India suffered massive casualties as well. Despite this, Indian Navy reached out to Sri Lanka and Maldives under Operation Rainbow, Operation Castor to provide humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to these small countries. So during these disaster management exercises, we collaborated with the American Navy, the Japanese Self-Defense Navy, and the Australian Navy. So this gave birth to the idea that four democracies in four corners of the Indo-Pacific, if they come together, they can form the Asian Security Diamond. This was a reference made by the famous Japanese leader Shinzo Abe. By early 2000s, by 2006-7 period, Japan had picked up multiple issues with China, especially in East China Sea, over the Senkaku-Diaoyu Island dispute. China was displaying a lot of military and diplomatic aggression against Japan. So Shinzo Abe prioritized the Indo-Pacific and he coined the strategy of free and open Indo-Pacific. He tried to bring international pressure on China to force China to respect international law, especially the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. And he coined this doctrine, the FOIP doctrine, free and open Indo-Pacific, and floated the idea of an Asian security diamond. Four democracies in four corners of the Indo-Pacific coming together to work together and help each other to maintain order and stability across Indo-Pacific. So this idea led to the first ever multilateral naval exercise under Malabar, which was hosted by India under the then Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. See, until then, Malabar exercise had remained just a bilateral naval exercise between India and US. The Malabar, which was started in 1990s, it was just an ordinary bilateral naval exercise between Indian Navy and US Navy. For the first time, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh invited other friendly navies, including Japan, Australia, and even Singapore. For the first time, 5 countries took part in the Malabar exercise. And this was sending out a clear message to China as well. So China, which was angered by this initiative of India, it retaliated against India, exerted pressure on India to stop creating such military alliances and posing a military threat to Chinese presence and China's growth. So China's retaliation and pressure, and as well as Shinzo Abe leaving office, eventually led to the collapse of this idea. The Quad was never born, or it was never conceptualized at that point. For the first time, under Malabar exercise, all these countries had come together, but the initiative did not go anywhere after this, especially after China's aggressive reaction to the Malabar exercise. Then India stopped inviting Japan, Australia, and Singapore, and Malabar was returned back to being a bilateral naval exercise. We stopped inviting the other 3 countries. So this idea was revived again in 2017 because China had continued its aggression, not just against India, but even against Japan, Australia as well, posing a constant threat. So India, which had had enough of Chinese aggression, in 2015, it brought Japan back into the Malabar exercise. So now Malabar exercise had become a trilateral exercise, with Japan becoming a permanent participant. In 2017, the idea of Shinzo Abe, of 4 democracies working together, the idea of Asian security diamond was revived and the Quad started taking shape. That's when the term Quad was coined and used for the first time. The Quad or the quadrilateral, referring to the 4 corners of Indo-Pacific where 4 democracies are present, which can act as a counterforce, a balancing force against Chinese aggression in the region. So as China's aggression increased in South China Sea, East China Sea, and the Himalayas, it brought these countries together to enforce international rules-based order and to maintain free and open nature of the Indo-Pacific. Then in 2020, following the Doklam dispute and then Galwan River Valley clashes and the Ladakh standoff, India invited Australia back into Malabar exercise. So then Malabar became a naval exercise of the Quad countries, essentially. Though India has maintained a distance from Malabar exercise and Quad, always saying that Quad is not a military group and Malabar is an independent parallel naval exercise. The same nations being part of a military exercise, does raise concerns for China. So since 2020, Malabar is now essentially a naval exercise involving the members of the quadrilateral. In 2021, finally, the Quad summit was inaugurated. This was the first ever Quad summit. After many years of conceptualization of the idea, after being revived in 2017, finally in 2021, the first ever Quad summit took place. But India ensured that Quad is not limited to just countering China, or it is not seen as a military bloc. In fact, Japan and US were very interested. They were very keen to turn the Quad into sort of a Asian NATO. China even started referring to the Quad group as Asian NATO, calling it a military alliance. But India ensured that Quad will not be given a military angle to it. In 2017, Prime Minister Modi reiterated the strategic autonomy of India and pointed out that India doesn't join such military clubs and alliances. Because eventually, if China were to retaliate, it would be India which would face the heat, as India shares a direct disputed border, unlike the other three members. Right? Japan, Australia, US, they don't share direct land borders as such with China. Though Japan has a maritime territorial dispute, right? It does not share immediate land boundaries. But in the case of India, we might face the entire heat from China. So, to avoid being caught between these sides, India ensured that Quad would not be given a military angle to it. In fact, we pushed the Quad to diversify. At India's insistence, the Quad went beyond its original mandate. Originally, it was about maintaining rules-based order and free and open nature of Indo-Pacific, which was an indirect message to China to exert international pressure on China. But post 2021, it has been diversified. Today, it focuses on infrastructure development across Indo-Pacific. It has focused on health to deal with pandemics and vaccine development. It also focuses on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief and promotes disaster management coordination. There is a dedicated counterterrorism initiative, and next month, Australia will be holding a counterterrorism tabletop exercise amongst the Quad nations. Then there is focus on climate change. As Indo-Pacific region is affected directly by the impact of climate change, there is an initiative under climate change and disaster management where these countries help the small nations of Indo-Pacific by providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. They've also started focusing on critical emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and others. So today, the Quad has really become a diversified group, and it does serve a vital purpose, especially for India's interests. It does help keep that pressure on China to force China to follow international rules in the Indo Pacific. Plus, it enhances India's reach all the way towards East Asia and South Pacific. It aligns with our Act East policy, our Indo Pacific doctrine, and our Mahasagar vision. But however, not everything is going well within the Quad. There are a lot of internal contradictions. See, first of all, Quad summit has not taken place in the last couple of years. Now, this is very concerning for us. Why? Because currently India is holding the chair position. The Quad summit was supposed to happen in India. US has already hosted a Quad summit. Japan has hosted. Now it was India's turn. But in 2024, the then US President Joe Biden did not agree to visit India. Because, see, first, our India US relations were affected by allegations of Indian government and intelligence agencies being involved in the alleged assassinations of Khalistani terrorists, the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, and the alleged assassination plot against Gurpantwant Singh Pannu, an American citizen. This created a friction in the relationship where Indian government and intelligence agencies like RAW were accused of being directly involved in the assassination plans. So this had caused a friction in the relationship, and as a result, the Quad summit did not take place. And also, Biden, given his electoral commitments, his age and health, was not ready to travel to India, and US pressurized India to hold the summit in United States instead. So eventually, the president got changed, elections took place. So in 2024, the Quad summit, which was supposed to happen in India, did not take place. Then came Mr. Trump. And from day one, Trump has been extremely volatile, taking erratic decisions. And most of these decisions have gone against Indian interests. From humiliating India to using racist taunts against India to levying high tariffs against India to even courting Pakistan, particularly during Operation Sindoor, and claiming credit for the ceasefire The relations took a complete hit, a complete downturn in India-US relations has been seen in the last 1.5 years. And again, Trump also is not willing to travel to India. So as a result, for 2 years straight, Quad Summit has not taken place. Now India might be forced to hand over the chair to Australia. So if India passes over the chair to Australia without hosting a Quad Summit, then that means the Quad engagement has been going down. Plus, there are many, many other problems and concerns, all arising out of Trump's erratic policies. The Iran war and the continuing Hormuz blockade, it's affecting all the other partners. Japan, Australia, India, all three are equally affected. But however, during the foreign ministers' meeting, the Quad nations did not blame the war on US or Israel. Though they are the instigators of the war, neither India nor Japan or Australia were willing to directly blame US and its ally Israel for the war. Instead, they criticized Iran for blockading Hormuz and for destabilizing West Asia and the supply chains. Of course, India is concerned and worried about the kind of aggression that US and Israel have shown, how it has destabilized the entire region. India didn't even bring up the sinking of Iris Dana. This was the perfect platform to discuss American naval action that torpedoed an Iranian warship in India's proximate waters, right? Though it was in Sri Lankan exclusive economic zone, right? Indian Ocean is essentially India's strategic backyard. The failure of India to register a protest or even to question the US has raised concerns and eyebrows. And it was expected that India would bring this up at Quad because this would be a right platform as it recognizes India's predominant role in the Indian Ocean region. But the issue was not brought up out of concern of offending the United States. Then, given Trump's close friendship with Pakistan, especially Asim Munir and Shahbaz Sharif, and Pakistan's involvement in mediating the Iran war, and how Trump claimed all the credit for achieving a ceasefire during Operation Sindoor, how Trump's administration has sided with Pakistan in the last 1.5 years, has been a serious matter of concern for India. It appears as though the balance of power between India and Pakistan has, in a way, favored Pakistan, given its proximity to White House under Donald Trump. The next big concern is Trump getting closer to China and Russia. The problem here would be that this could distance India. See, for us, any day, better ties between US Russia is favorable as it allows India to also have its traditional close relations with Russia. But problem is Trump's opening up to China, his recent visit to China, and the assurances that US has made. This could probably allow China to dominate the Indo-Pacific. If you look at the new national security strategy of US that was brought out by Donald Trump, it talks about carving up the world into different hemispheres, into different blocks. The Trump administration says in the new national security strategy that Western Hemisphere is America's backyard, America's dominant theater, which means US might be willing to concede some space for Russia in Eurasia and Arctic belt and for China in Indo-Pacific belt. If US were to make such a concession, if these three powers were to carve up the world into their own hemispheres, then this could be detrimental to India's influence. So there are a lot of internal contradictions within the group, and especially Trump's tariffs, though it has been struck down by the US Supreme Court. His trade policies, trade wars aimed at India, and in general, the racist comments and the irresponsible statements coming out of Trump administration, the rising anti-immigration hatred against Indian community in the US, the complicated immigration policies that are being brought out, which affects the Indian community. All these are matters of concern. But India, as of now, has not raised these issues directly with the US. And that's why experts believe that the Quad has a lot of internal contradictions. Without resolving this, the grouping cannot really move forward. So based on what we discussed, please take up this mains question for your answer writing practice. Now moving on, we have few small articles and then we'll take up the prelim section and the PIB article. On the front page, we have a report linked to the IMD forecast with regard to the upcoming monsoon season. So in the previous forecast that IMD had given out in the month of April, it had predicted the monsoons to set in by 26th May in the state of Kerala with a margin of plus or minus 4 days. As you know, I'm sure you must have studied geography. The monsoon first arrives at Andaman Nicobar, followed by the state of Kerala, right? So, as per IMD estimates, it was supposed to hit Kerala by 26th May, but even now, there is no sign of monsoons making an entry into Kerala. According to the current estimates, the monsoon has arrived in Andaman Nicobar just a few days ago, last week. The monsoon winds have arrived in Andaman Nicobar, bringing some rain. But however, the rain is largely limited, it's restricted. The quantum of rain being received, which is being recorded, is below expectation. As of now, as we speak, currently, the monsoon winds are roughly 100 kilometers away from Kerala's coast. And IMD is anticipating that any time it could move over Kerala's coastline. So there is a delay that is expected right now. In the latest forecast, IMD acknowledges that this year the monsoons will be delayed by a few days. It could go well into June first week, right? We had seen this back in 2015 as well. Now, this is a matter of serious concern. Why? Because the last time the IMD got the forecast wrong was in 2015. Not because IMD's methodology is wrong. See, IMD has made rapid advances in its weather forecasting systems, be it the satellite technology it is using in coordination with ISRO, or the Doppler radars it has installed, and the wide network of automatic weather station that it operates, and the weather modeling systems it is using in combination with supercomputers and AI models. It's one of the most sophisticated weather systems in the world. So IMD has been able to provide quite accurate forecasts. Now, this is a clear sign of El Nino having a direct bearing on the arrival of monsoon and the quantum of rainfall which is expected in the monsoon. We saw this back in 2014-2015 period as well. Even then, IMD forecast had gone wrong. After that, for nearly 10, 11 years, IMD was always spot on. But now, there is again a clear delay. And if you look at the forecast for the coming monsoon season, the long period average, which was previously predicted at 92%, which itself was low, has now been revised to just around 90%. We saw this in 2015 as well, where initial LPA was predicted in the range of 93%. Finally, the actual rainfall we got was just 86%. In 2014, the year before that, it was just around 88% LPA. Now, this is a clear sign that shortfall in monsoons because of El Nino. El Nino induced monsoon shortfall can continue for at least a couple of years, and this can lead towards a drought condition. It can result in water scarcity. What will begin as a meteorological drought due to lack of rainfall can turn into a hydrological drought due to water scarcity, water shortage. And in a worst case scenario, it can turn into agricultural drought, where even soil moisture will start drying out, which can directly affect farming and the rural economy in the country. So, the concerned ministry is the Ministry of Agriculture with regard to drought as a disaster. It works closely with IMD to keep track of monsoon estimates and the forecasts. And right now, the forecasts are not looking very great. It's not looking very positive. So red flags have already been raised by Ministry of Agriculture and IMD that we should be prepared for possible drought season in the coming monsoon cycle and the coming months. However, there can be one relief if at all some factors work in our favor. One is if there is a positive Indian Ocean dipole. Indian Ocean dipole refers to irregular sea surface temperature that is recorded, which alters the rain and wind pattern in the Indian Ocean. If there is a positive tilt in the Indian Ocean dipole, it can have a favorable impact on the monsoon. Next, another factor which can play a role is the Madden-Julian oscillation. The Madden-Julian oscillation is a very unique system of cloud and rain that is seen near the equator. It occurs once in every 30 to 60-day cycle. So a favorable Madden-Julian oscillation, right, could also positively influence the Indian monsoons. Or if even a low pressure center were to develop, if low pressure systems were to develop in the northern part of Indian Ocean, this can also have a favorable impact on Indian monsoons. But as of now, they are not present. But if luck works for India, then if one of these situations develop in combination, they can bring slightly greater amount of rainfall. Or else, the lower rain expected this time could potentially lead to a drought situation in the country. The next article, the Supreme Court of India has issued binding guidelines to high courts with regard to passing final judgments. See, generally, what happens in judicial proceedings after hearing the entire case, the judiciary, right, they reserve the judgment to a later date, right? Even after the final closing arguments are made by both sides, by both the parties, the judges don't immediately pass the final judgment. They take some time, right? They reserve the judgment for a future date. Now, as of now, as per existing laws and regulations, there is no deadline which is given to the judges to pass a final judgment. But the convention is that, as a matter of convention, judges are expected to deliver the final judgment after reserving the judgment within 2 to 6 months. That is the convention which is practiced within the judiciary. But in many cases, it has been noticed, especially at high courts and some Supreme Court judges as well, that they reserve the judgment and they don't pass the final judgment for even up to 1 year and more than 1 year. Now, this unnecessarily delays justice, particularly in criminal cases where there can be very adverse consequences. That's why the Supreme Court has put its foot down and issued these binding guidelines to all judges in the country that if you are reserving judgment, from the day of reserving the judgment, you will get maximum 3 months. A strict deadline has now been laid. Let's say today a judge has reserved the judgment. Final arguments were closed, judgment has been reserved. Now the judge will get 3 months starting from today. Within that, final judgment has to be passed. Then, with regard to bail, in many cases, judges, they don't have an inclination to grant bail, especially in high profile cases. So now the Supreme Court is setting some clear guidelines in this regard as well. If the accused is eligible for bail, giving bail should be the norm. This has always been the legal principle. But now the Supreme Court has said that once bail is decided, let's say the judge is inclining in favor of bail, you should not delay the judgment. It should be ordered on the same day. The order should be passed the same day and transmitted to the prison and ensure that the under trial is released on the same day, or worst case by the next day. So basically, within a day or two, the under trial who has got the bail should be released, which means the orders of the court will have to be quickly communicated. The court should first issue the bail order, communicate that to the jail authorities, and ensure that the under trial is released on the same day if possible, or worst case by tomorrow. So this will go a long way to secure some sense of justice with regard to the accused and the under trials and their rights. Is that clear? And also with regard to habeas corpus petitions, the Supreme Court has issued some clear directions in any criminal matters where the accused are being acquitted, or in orders involving demolition of property, because they have irreversible outcomes. So the courts are ordered with the Supreme Court to act immediately, to issue immediate orders on the same day without waiting. Because if, let's say, the judge waits for a few days, what if the local authorities go demolish the house? That becomes an irreversible action, which can't be corrected later. So the Supreme Court has set these clear deadlines for the High Court judges to ensure that better justice is delivered and quick justice is delivered. Next, the RBI has brought out its annual report for 2025-2026 fiscal, and it is quite alarming, especially with regard to our foreign inflows, our balance of payments, our current account deficit. There are some very concerning signs that are coming up. So this explains why Prime Minister Modi appealed to the Indian public to reduce consumption of gold, reduce consumption of fuel, avoid foreign travel, because there is a significant pressure on our forex reserves. According to RBI's data, balance of payments, it has jumped by close to $30.8 billion. A deficit of 30.8 billion has been recorded. See, what is balance of payments? It's essentially your current account and capital account. Now, on the current account, it's primarily your merchandise trade and invisibles which are accounted. We generally register a current account deficit as we always import more than what we export. This, along with other cross-border transactions, including remittances, will always create a certain current account deficit for India, and it remains in the range of $250-280 billion per year, right? As India imports significantly higher than what we export, and after accounting for all the other cross-border transactions, including remittances, we run a very high current account deficit. Now, usually this massive current account deficit was counterbalanced by our capital account surplus. Capital account includes all the investments that are coming in through foreign direct investment, portfolio investment into the capital markets, and any external borrowings and external assistance that we receive and other assets. So in the past few years, we were maintaining a capital account surplus because we were getting a lot of FDI and foreign portfolio investment, where foreign investment was flooding into the Indian market as they saw India as a lucrative destination to invest. This was helping us counterbalance the current account deficit, which used to be massive because of high dependency on imports. Now, this delicate balance is getting affected. Our capital account surplus has fallen by almost 99%. There has been a huge outflow of foreign capital from the Indian market. Given the global geopolitical environment and the lack of growth opportunities within the Indian economy, foreign capital has taken flight, creating a dangerous situation where we are running low on the capital account surplus. The surplus, which used to be in the range of $70-80 billion, it has come down to hardly $70 million, like a 99% reduction. So the only way in which we can now balance the current account deficit is to tap into our forex reserves. That's why the RBI engaged in these operations using the forex reserves that were built up to match the rising current account deficit. Now, this cannot be sustained, right? It can't be sustained because this puts a big dent in your forex reserves. That is the reason why the government has appealed to Indians to reduce any foreign expenditure, buying of gold, fuel, because we have a lot of dependency. Almost 100% gold used in India is imported. 90% of the fuel that we consume, right, particularly crude oil, is also imported. So this is putting a lot of strain on the import bill, pushing up the current account deficit, and capital account surplus is declining, mainly because of almost low to zero investments coming into the Indian market and a big outflow of foreign capital. So this is the deadly situation that India is facing. Low investment from foreign investors on one side, complete outflow of foreign capital, plus rising imports. So it's creating this delicate situation where balance of payments has surged to nearly $30.8 billion. Next, China has accelerated its nuclear command control systems and structures. There is a clear sign which has been brought out by a team of researchers looking at satellite images. See, China has massive nuclear land forces which operate the ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles of China, which are capable of striking any city, any part of United States. Now, in Xinjiang province, in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, China has a massive ICBM facility, the Hami ICBM silo, which is largely an underground structure, which is reinforced and hardened to withstand any kind of aerial bombing. So China, which possibly anticipates a war with the US, has designed the structure to withstand any possible American attack, any possible American first strike, even a nuclear strike, has been anticipated by China and the nuclear structures that hold the intercontinental ballistic missiles, the long range ICBMs, they are designed to withstand the possible first nuclear strike by United States. But following lessons learned from the Iran war, where US has used bunker buster bombs targeting Iran's underground nuclear enrichment facilities at Fordo, at Natanz, China is probably incorporating some of those lessons to harden the structures to ensure they can withstand even a nuclear first strike and China can deliver its second retaliatory strike. So those signs are visible in these satellite images. And according to studies by think tanks and experts, China is also modernizing its C3 network, the command control communication network, to ensure a foolproof command chain in case of a conflict with the US, especially a nuclear conflict with the US. So the advances happening in China's nuclear doctrine, it does have implications for India as well, right? Now, coming to the prelim section, let's take a quick look at the smaller articles in the paper. In Gujarat, which is the only home to Asiatic lions in the world, a deadly tragedy has occurred. The Gir National Park and the areas around it, they host the only known uh, Asiatic lion population, right? Gujarat has around 891 recorded Asiatic lions, a very decent, healthy population. But however, 8 lion cubs have lost their lives in the past few days because of a suspected Babesia infection. Right? So, what is this Babesia infection? What causes it? How to contain it? Can it affect humans? That is something you need to understand from a prelims point of view. Babesia is essentially a type of microscopic parasite. It is mainly transmitted by ticks. Tick bite is what will transmit the Babesia parasite. It can affect animals like lions, right? It can affect human beings as well. So, the Gujarat Forest Department has already initiated certain measures to contain the spread, to mainly handle the ticks in the forest areas and treat the lions which might be infected with ticks. Because see, lions are reporting symptoms very similar to flu-like condition, right? They're developing high fever, weakness, cough, nasal discharge, and eventually the lions are, passing away. 8 cubs have died. So the same tick-borne parasite can infect human beings as well, and it's quite deadly. So this is essentially borne by ticks. Ticks are the vector. They carry the Babesia parasite. It's a microscopic parasite. And those who get bitten by those ticks, they are the ones who will get infected. Symptoms are quite similar to malaria-like symptoms, even flu-like symptoms, starting with fever, weakness. It affects the RBCs quite significantly, and it can result in life-threatening conditions very soon if it is not treated, right? So it can affect humans as well, but wild animals are at great risk because of Babesia outbreak that are spread through tick bites. Next, Indian markets have seen a big hit, especially Nifty 50 slipped by 1.5% because the MSCI index was rebalanced. Just because of the rebalancing of this benchmark index, investors have pulled out, highlighting the importance and the role of this index. Just because this index was rebalanced, it contains a portfolio of different stocks. Around 4 stocks were removed from it because of underperformance, and I think 4 or 5 new stocks were added into the list. So just because the benchmark index was altered, rejigged, and rebalanced, investors have panicked and pulled out, resulting in a 1.5% drop in Nifty 50. So how come the Indian markets are vulnerable, and what is this MSCI index? It stands for Morgan Stanley Capital International. It's one of the most globally renowned indices in the markets. Investors consider this as a benchmark, right? They look at this for signs, for trends, and a good MSCI rating will automatically attract investments. Any sudden fluctuation changes will obviously result in flight of capital. So please make a note. The MSCI, it's essentially a capital market investment index brought out by Morgan Stanley. So it basically creates a basket of well-performing stocks in the particular stock market, and it acts as an indicator, benchmark indicator for investors. Now, coming to the last article from the Hindu, the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, has urged European countries to contribute more for Mission Aspides. Mission Aspides is a naval mission of the European Naval Force deployed in the Red Sea to secure the shipping lane from Houthi attacks. See, back in 2023 2024, when Israel went to war in Gaza against Hamas, the Houthi rebels, who happen to be another proxy of Iran, launched attacks against vessels passing through Red Sea, especially targeting American and Israeli linked ships. This disrupted shipping through the vital Red Sea corridor, which is already bound by two choke points, Suez Canal to the north and Bab el Mandeb to the south. So, to secure this critical shipping lane, the EU Naval Force, EU NAVFOR, deployed a mission called Mission Aspides. Around 2 to 3 naval vessels were deployed, and since then, they are acting as a defensive force in the Red Sea shipping corridor. Parallelly, the US had launched an offensive military operation called Operation Prosperity Guardian, under which US struck Yemen, targeting Houthi positions. But the European mission, Mission Aspides, was not an offensive mission. It's a defensive mission to protect the ships, commercial vessels passing through from any Houthi attacks. Now, the EU foreign policy chief has raised a concern that 2 to 3 naval vessels are not enough to safeguard and secure the Red Sea corridor. She has urged the European partners to contribute more so that European naval force can deploy more warships under Mission Aspides to secure this critical shipping lane. Now, coming to the end of the discussion, as promised, we will pick up the most important PIB articles. Yesterday, there was one very, very important press release. This press release was from Ministry of Earth Sciences. So, the government of India has rolled out India's first ever skycast system at Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport. With this, India has become the 19th country in the world to deploy an advanced integrated aviation weather monitoring system. I'm sure you must be aware that during landing and takeoff, especially in places like Delhi during the winter months when there is heavy fog, atmospheric weather and ground level weather plays a critical role, right? It induces a lot of turbulence as well, increases the flight risk, makes the job difficult for the pilots to navigate and safely land and take off. So across the world, there is this advanced integrated weather forecasting system that integrates with aviation data. So they use a network of sensors and weather trackers from sonar technology to deployment of radar wind profilers, ground-based fog spectrometers, lidar celiometers, using different technologies. They are deployed on the ground to mainly monitor the atmospheric changes, the weather changes happening up to 3 kilometers in altitude from the surface of the earth. So this is essentially a micro level weather prediction, focusing on fog and other turbulent conditions which can affect the flight movement and the flight path. Now, this system has been installed in India for the first time. Only 19 countries have such sophisticated skycast systems. It gives you real time weather intelligence. It will guide and help the pilots to navigate and avoid any disruption caused by fog and turbulence. Is that clear? So please make a note. Very soon it will be rolled out in other airports as well, especially in northern India, where fog conditions during winter months become a deadly hindrance at our airports. It will next come up at Jewar Airport in Noida. Clear? So on this note, I bring this analysis to an end. I hope it was an interesting and useful discussion. If you liked it, press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.